Welcome to the SEC Unfiltered channel. Joining us today is one of my favorite college basketball media members, analytics members, a guy just part of the phenomenal college basketball community that is on social media, JBR Bracketology. JBR, how we doing today, brother?
We are doing well. How are you doing?
Doing well, man. I appreciate you taking the time. It's been a wild basketball season so far. And I know, obviously, we're an SEC channel. We have you on here. Been a historic year so far for the SEC. Just thoughts and reasons why you think the SEC is on this historic non-conference run so far.
I mean, I think first and foremost, it comes to hiring good coaches, right? I think the SEC has done a really good job over the last 5 to 7 years in just in hiring better coaches. And then kind of following coaches is entering the NIL era and getting better players, right? I think the SEC, certainly if you broke it down by the recruiting site, you would see that the SEC teams are getting more top 100 recruits probably than ever before. And so when you're getting better talent and you're getting better coaches, you are seeing a better product on the floor. And I think it's to the detriment in many ways of the ACC next door is, the SEC is just getting a lot better talent than some of the other leagues, and we're certainly seeing that playing out in the early part of the season because this has been absolutely insane following the SEC night in, night out.
No, I mean, it is. It's up there. You look at the numbers and stuff. Obviously, you're crunching them. I mean, it goes back to the 2011 year in the Big East, probably the year maybe Kimball Walker and them had to win out when they ended up, Jim Calhoun and them ended up winning the whole thing. Is it kind of back to maybe that kind of, because with the Big East that year, if I remember right, you got 11? Am I right? I think they got 11 bids that year.
Yep. 2011 Big East got 11, and that is the record.
Just a tremendous start by the conference, as our listeners know. But JBR, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background before we start digging in deep. Just wanted to hit off why you thought the league was so good right off the bat. But I really want you to go in and tell us what is your background, where do the analytics come from? Again, guys, if you don't follow him already, go give him the follow at JBR Bracketology, also bracketmatrix.com. So JBR, just tell us a little bit about yourself, where this started, where you got into the analytics side of college basketball.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my background is definitely in math and engineering. My college degree is in civil engineering. So I've always been into the numbers and more of the analytics side. I like using numbers just because they're objective, right? Like, we see the AP poll get ripped apart every week. Anytime anyone puts some sort of subjective ranking, it's going to be ripped apart. Of course, the analytic metrics get ripped apart too, but I like using numbers because they're objective and basically can build off of those numbers to kind of formulate an order of teams. You can formulate, more objective rankings as opposed to just trying to use the eye test, which is a lot harder, a lot harder than it would appear. There's a bunch of bracketologists I'm in a group chat with, and we've been making weekly picks, just straight up, not against the spread, just straight up, picking winners for kind of 10 or so of the biggest games each week. And I think the leader in the pack is like 55%. Just straight up. I mean, these are guys that watch a lot of basketball, including myself. I mean, I'm near the top, but it's really hard, like, to predict just straight up winners. Even it's really unpredictable night in, night out, especially in college sports.
So in this group chat you triggered me to ask, is there some competition there on who hits the most year to now? Maybe y'all just started this group chat this year. I don't know. Maybe if it's been going on for a couple of years, you have some kind of competition going, who hits the highest success rate and actually predicting the bracket out of the 68 teams?
So there is, within the bracket matrix, there is a scoring system that, we all obviously try to do as best as possible. But no, the group chat started last year, sometime halfway through the year. But it's just a good way to check notes, and there's things that you miss. I mean, there's so many teams, there's so many games, there's injuries, there's scheduling quirks, there's so many things that you don't know, even if you think you are following the sport as intensively as possible. So it's definitely helpful to check notes and have guys point out things that you may not be aware of.
Now, JBR, I wanted to ask you this, and I'm actually really intrigued by your answer here. I'm actually excited to hear it. Why is your analytics? I'm not attacking this in an aggressive way. I'm just saying, where are you different at from your analytical approach from, say, maybe like a Joe Lunardi, who most people, when they think bracketology, I think from a national perspective, because obviously he's on the big platform at ESPN. Hey, where do you think you differentiate from him?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's neat is that everyone who does bracketology in some way, shape, or form, their approach differs, right? Like everyone is going to value or emphasize different things in a different manner. My approach has always been largely from an analytical side. My seed list for the most part is formulaic. I pull in the quad records, I pull in all of the metrics between the net, between the three resume metrics we're using this year: KPI, strength of record, and WAB. The three predictive metrics: BPI, KenPom, and Torvik. I pull in the strength of schedule, the non-conference strength of schedule. I pull in all of that data, and it's kind of a formula that I've been tweaking for about 5 years now to try to best match what the committee will do. But there was one comment that Lunardi made, going back to your question, that I thought was interesting, because I never knew or thought that he used any type of formula. I thought he was just going based off of looking at the data, looking at the numbers, and just making his best guess, which is fine. But he did actually, in a spaces with one of my friends on here, T3 Bracketology, he did indicate that he does use a formula to at least initially sort teams. But at the same time, the committee does not use a formula. The committee is just looking at the numbers, and the committee is humans who, quite frankly, don't watch nearly as much college basketball as any of us do, or any of your listeners do. I don't know how much they watch, but I think it's a fraction of how much we follow.
No doubt. So that's an interesting point you brought up on the space with T3. So he does. So a lot. It was kind of like a lot of people thought he kind of was just going off eye test a little bit to some extent.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I mean, there was no reason for me to believe he was using any type of formula. I'd never heard him say that, but I thought that was really interesting. Yeah, the spaces was last February, so about 10 months ago.
Let me pull up the screen. We're going to bring up the screen. You released your new seedings list today. Let me make sure I'm sharing that. Yeah, we got it up right there. So you got 14 teams in this today. You shared it with me. I've seen it. A lot of people have already seen it. Again, guys, go give them the follow at JBR Bracketology. Does a phenomenal job covering the sport of college basketball from an analytical approach. And so you got 14 teams from the SEC in this, correct? As we stand right now, you got LSU as the last four out. Where do you potentially see? Again, it's tough to say. I mean, we got 18 conference games coming up. Other teams probably have, two more non-conference games, one or two more non-conference games before we get into conference play. Who do you see could make the biggest movement in conference play, and who could drop down? And again, that's a loaded question because, again, I mean, if somebody went randomly 4-14 in the league, yeah, it's going to change something. But realistically, who in your head in the SEC could make the biggest jump seed-wise and probably could drop the lowest depending on how they finish in conference?
I would say, one team that could make the biggest jump is probably Arkansas, just with Calipari's pedigree and just the talent on the roster. They haven't really done a whole lot yet. They've only played 3 games versus quad 1 and 2 competition, and they've only won one of them versus Michigan the other night. But I think Arkansas is the kind of team that could move up quickly if it all comes together. And then on the flip side, a team that I could see moving down, even though they just had a nice win last night, is probably Oklahoma, just based off their predictive metrics. A lot of people like to kind of shit on some of the metrics sometimes, but I will say that the metrics are more right than they are wrong. So just looking at Oklahoma's metrics as they're updated today, they're 36 or lower in BPI, KenPom, Torvik, and net. So I would say if one team was predicted to move down just based off how good this conference is, I would say Oklahoma is one of them, even though, I do have them on the top of the 5 line right now. And the only reason Oklahoma isn't even higher than that, because their resume metrics certainly warrants a higher seed than that. But it goes back to those predictive metrics, and especially this early in the season, I'm going to weigh the predictive metrics a little bit heavier given that there are still so many games remaining.
So as you can see, folks, here JBR's got Auburn as a 1 seed, Tennessee is a 1 seed, Kentucky sitting there as a 1 seed right now, Florida and Alabama in those 2 seed slots. You got Texas A&M coming as a 3 seed, Mississippi State at a 4 seed, Oklahoma as a 5 seed, Ole Miss is a 6, Georgia is a 6, Arkansas is a 9, Texas is a 10, Vanderbilt as a 10 as well across the board, and then LSU as the first team out. JBR, is it safe to say a little bit? I mean, it may be even too early to say this. It probably honestly is after their win last night, the other day against Clemson. Like, is there any team you feel like it's just like kind of out of it right now in the SEC? Or you're like, well, no, I wouldn't say that. Again, those 2 teams that come to mind, probably LSU and South Carolina, but I want to hear your take on this.
Yeah, no, I would not say any team is out of it. And I even posted the other day, like after South Carolina beat Clemson, I said any SEC team that finishes 9-9 or better is a guaranteed lock, 100%. And honestly, most of the teams, even if they went 8-10, would be in, other than South Carolina and maybe LSU. I would say every other team at 8-10 would be in. Once you start moving below that, then it kind of depends on what bubble teams and other conferences do. But even 7-11, I would say at least half of the SEC would get a bid at 7-11 in conference play. So it's pretty historic what the SEC has been able to do in the non-conference. But yeah, I mean, South Carolina's, their metrics are certainly the worst of any SEC school. They don't have a single metric in the top 60. They came in at number 75 overall on my seed list today. So, they're a good 30 or so teams out from North Carolina there.
No, I mean, I asked you, I think I tweeted at you the other day asking like if a 7-11 Mississippi State got in, and you're like, yeah, for sure. So it's like you said, 7-11 was kind of the point where you're like, all right, that probably is on the low end. But as you're saying, you feel like a lot of these teams at 7-11 outside of some of those teams, probably like the Texases, maybe depending on what Arkansas look like, South Carolina, LSU, okay, you think they'd get in?
Yeah, I do.
So here's a question for you. And I like asking the analytics guys this. Is there anybody that you ever see, especially this year, you can tell me a story. Is there anybody that you feel like the analytics either like or don't like a little bit more than like you like or your eyes tell you from you watching the sport?
I mean, the analytics have definitely caught up. I think Florida's been incredibly impressive. They've just been surging up my seed list very quickly, picking up 2 quad 1 wins just in the last week. But no, I would say Arkansas is still the team I'm most intrigued about, just because they were a team I was really high on coming into the year. And then just the first 4 to 6 weeks were just so underwhelming. It was nice to finally see some elite basketball, and it wasn't even the whole game. I don't know how much of the Arkansas Michigan game you watched, but it was only in spurts, but those spurts were like, this is the team I expected to see. This is the team Arkansas fans expected to see. So I'm hoping we see a more consistent Arkansas Razorbacks team going forward. And then I also want to give a shout out to Georgia, who I think is kind of under the radar. They haven't played an overly challenging schedule. They've only played 2 games against quad 1 and quad 2 competition, but that neutral court win over St. John's is going to age really nicely. St. John's just blew out DePaul the other day, and I think St. John's is like top 12 or top 15 in every predictive metric. So I think St. John's is going to be very good going forward, and that's a win that, right now it is a quad 1A win, and I expect it to stay a quad 1A win for the rest of the season. So Georgia at 9-1 with that quad 1A win over St. John's. I think Georgia has been impressive and deserves a shout out, because I expect the Bulldogs to go dancing based off what I've seen so far.
A couple more questions here, guys. Again, we got JBR Bracketology. Go give him the follow at JBR Bracketology. A few more questions here before we get you out of here, brother. And again, I appreciate you taking the time. How many teams would you say, again, we got an 18-game conference schedule right here in front of us in about a week and a half, 2 weeks. So still a lot of things to be said. But if you had to say a number right now, we've talked about how many teams will get into the tournament potentially. How many teams would you consider just absolute, just cold stone locks right now to make the NCAA tournament from the SEC? Just a number.
So I always wait till the second Friday in January to put out my official locks.
Yeah.
I've never been wrong on a lock, but there's so many games remaining. And, we saw Janai Broom go down for Auburn last night. And like, there's just, when there's so many games remaining, you got to be a little bit careful before throwing around the L word, especially this early in the season. But I would say in terms of teams that are very likely to earn bids, I would say probably the top 7 teams that are on my seed list. All the teams that are 1 to 4 seeds. So Auburn, Tennessee, Kentucky, Florida, Alabama, Texas A&M, and Mississippi State. I would say all of those are probably 95% plus. And then Oklahoma is very close to that as well. I'm just a little bit lower on Oklahoma just because of their predictive metrics.
JBR, again, I appreciate you joining us, brother. Last question before we get out of here. Ultimate feet to the fire. Final question. Let's just fast forward. We're in March. I know today's December 19th, but we're in March. When the dust settles, we play the 18-game conference schedule. We go to Nashville, play the SEC tournament. How many teams from the SEC would you say right now, with the information you have in front of you, would say how many teams from the SEC you think make the NCAA tournament?
I think we see 12. I think we see a new record for most teams out of one league earn bids to the NCAA tournament, and I think we get 12. I think you're gonna have a few teams that just don't win enough games, even though they're not bad losses. Like at a certain point when you've had 20, 25 opportunities to earn quad 1, quad 2 wins, and you're bad third. At a certain point, the committee is just going to say, hey, you had your opportunities and just didn't convert at a high enough rate, even though you might have 4 or 5 quad 1 wins. But I'm going to say 12. I think absolute minimum is 10, but I think realistically you're looking at 11 or 12 bids, and I would say an ultimate ceiling of 13. But that would be pretty crazy. I think at a certain point when the committee's looking at bubble teams and you already, like, if you theoretically already had 11 or 12 SEC teams in the field and then they're debating between 3 or 4 other teams for, say, the last spot or last 2 spots, I think they're going to be more likely to give the Big East a 4th bid or the ACC a 5th bid than they're going to give the SEC 13th bid, right? I don't know that's necessarily fair, but they are humans, and I think there's going to be some elements of fairness and wanting to distribute bids more evenly amongst the conferences, if possible.
No, that makes complete sense. Again, this hit me right off the top of my head. And from your metrics, from your analytics, what is Alabama's performance last night? How much does that drop them down in the numbers? Obviously, you didn't play well against probably a quad 4 potential team in North Dakota. From your perspective, how much is that bringing them down? Or you're kind of like, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it probably wouldn't matter if they go do what they're supposed to do in conference play.
I think at the end of the day, it's almost entirely meaningless. It did very slightly move them down in the efficiency metrics overnight, but I think in the grand scheme of things, it's extremely minor. It was a true road game. They won. Yes, it's quad 4, I think barely, but I don't think it really makes any difference. And more than anything, it just further emphasizes, at least in my mind, why most coaches just won't play those types of games, right? We saw Bruce Pearl and Auburn go to Appalachian State last year and lose,
Yeah.
The Alabama go on the road against a North Dakota team that I think was ranked in the high 200s, is below 500 on the year. And yet that game was going down to the wire. I had it on my YouTube TV quad box. I'm like, what is going on in this game? But, it's really hard to win on the road. And especially when you go to some of these smaller schools, like that is the biggest game anyone has seen at North Dakota basketball in I don't know how many years, but I can't imagine there's that many AP top 10 power conference schools that go play a true road game at North Dakota, right? And not SEC, but we saw Rutgers go on the road to Kennesaw State earlier this year.
Yeah, and drop
and
one.
lose.
Yeah, you're right.
It's really hard to win these true road games, especially at schools that aren't used to hosting power conference ranked opponents.
No, I 100% agree. Weird dynamic, the Grant Nelson homecoming type game, kind of in a smaller gym these dudes are used to playing. Yeah, You can tell me Alabama's got their AD out there in pregame warm-up shooting shots. So it's kind of like, I mean, where's kind of the focus there? That's not a normal thing. Like
Right.
your AD isn't out there. So it's kind of like, I mean, overall, is anybody taking this real serious? And that's nothing to take away from North Dakota. They played well last night, but still Alabama struggled. But JBR, let me stop sharing your thing right there. But dude, I appreciate you joining us today, man. Respect your work. Follow a lot of the things you do on Twitter. How I was tweeting at you the other day about Mississippi State in 11 and 7 or 7 and 11. Give him the follow at JBR Bracketology if you have not already. I don't know why you wouldn't be. The guy does a phenomenal job, as well as a lot of other bracketologists across the college football landscape. Anything else you want to add there, JBR, before we get out of here?
Nope, I think that's it. I appreciate you having me on, and maybe we'll do it again sometime soon.
No problem, guys. Remember this interview with our guy from JBR Bracketology brought to you by our buddies over at GameTime app. Download the GameTime app and use code SECU for $20 off your first purchase, guys. A lot of college basketball tickets you can go out there, college football playoff. In football, you can go by. We got college baseball coming up as well, guys. And even like if you're big into comedians, big into any kind of entertainment, we have that as well. But go use code SECU, $20 off your first purchase, and tell them your buddies at the SEC Unfiltered channel sent you. For myself, for my favorite bracketologist, JBR, I'm Dave Shumate. He is JBR, and I appreciate you joining us on this segment of SEC Unfiltered.